Wade Giles is an epic agent with Douglas Elliman Real Estate in Austin, Texas, and he's joining the podcast today. Wade, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you very much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Wade, before we dive into the work that you're doing, your career and so forth there in the Austin area, which is a pretty competitive market. It's a tough market to stand out in for sure. So looking forward to talking a little bit about your journey. Share for listeners a little bit about your background, hometown and previous career, if there was any before you got into real estate, and then what drew you to real estate.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. I grew up in Friendswood, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston originally. Moved to Austin in middle school. Ended up spending high school and college in Louisiana. Backpacked around the world. Moved to Australia. Found myself in Atlanta after college and coming back from the U.S. And eventually ended up in a place I never thought I would end up, which was New Jersey. But I met my now husband. This is almost 16 years ago, and so I lost the bet and had to move up there, and I had never dealt with the cold and so on and so forth. But worked for a couple of major clothing brands on their corporate side. I have a finance background, but even in college, I went to LSU. I had a concentration in real estate, and I remember taking appraisal classes. I thought I wanted to be an appraiser. And I took like 3 or 4 of them. Really enjoyed them. Fast forward, when I left the U.S. for a while to go travel, my finance degree was not so valuable because we were in a recession, and so I didn't know what to do. I got a job in sales. My then husband was working still in that same position, and then eventually got into corporate world on the corporate side of some clothing brands, helping them figure out like where they were going to put in their next brick and mortar, and just different things on their financial and M&A divisions. So did that for a while. We had an opportunity to leave New Jersey, which I jumped at. I mean, no offense. I mean, it's beautiful state, wonderful people, but my gosh, it is cold. And I was commuting into Manhattan every day, and it was just hard. So we moved to Austin, almost 12 years ago, and have never looked back. So before we moved here, when we were still in New Jersey, I remember one day saying, Jeff, I really want to go into real estate. I was like, I just feel like that's my calling. It feels like something I'm really passionate about. As a kid, I remember going to my grandfather. They had a bunch of money, and he had a Rob Report magazine. And so we didn't have any money, but I would steal his old Rob Reports and look at the classified sections for these amazing estates. And I couldn't ever figure out at the young age, like why a row home in Manhattan was worth $10 million and this amazing estate, in wherever, Nebraska, was $2 million and looked so much, location hadn't quite registered yet. But all that to say, it's something I've always been drawn to. So I said that to Jeff, my husband, and I said, I think I want to go into real estate. He's like, you don't really like the people here all that much, and you don't really like the architecture in the area that we lived in, which is true. And he's like, I just think it's a bad idea. Anyway, fast forward, we moved to Austin. I was like, I like the people, I love the architecture. I want to go into real estate. And we had only been here for 3 months. I quit my job. I went to real estate school, like actually went to school. That's how long ago it was. And just fell in love with it. I was fortunate enough to get picked up by a luxury boutique brokerage here in Austin that had never hired someone as green as me in the 20 plus years that they had been in business, and they took a chance on me, and I ran with it. And I remember when I was right before I got my license, my real estate license, I told Jeff, I was like, I'll give it 6 months, and that should be enough. And if I don't make it in 6 months, then I'll go and get a boring, desk job. And what I didn't know then is that 6 months is not nearly enough time.
Right.
But thankfully, I had enough traction where I was able to kind of keep it going.
You saw some positivity and some potential there within that 6 months. That's exactly what I was
Absolutely.
thinking when you mentioned that's funny. I think a lot of people come into the industry saying, I'll see how it goes for 6 months. And we know that that's just like you're just getting started at 6 months. So Uh, how long ago did you get licensed?
My very first day of showing property was January 1st, 2014. 11 years ago, I showed some buyers. I was living in an apartment downtown, and my neighbors were going to buy a house. And I said, okay, guys, like, look, I don't know anything. I don't even know my way around this town, but I promise you, I will find the right answers out for you if I don't know them. And I was like, if you'll just trust me, I've got some great people that I can lean on that will help me out through this process. If you'll just, be willing to be patient with me, I'd really appreciate it. And they were wonderful. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, that was not to get too tangential, but that's when I really knew that this job was for me. They were my very first clients. He was a former Army Ranger, like total badass. And she was a graphic designer who wanted to be like in the middle of town. She loved like, so he wanted to be out in the woods, out of town. She wanted to be in the middle of it. And so we looked at, I want to say like 45 homes. And I mean, they were my only client. I was just ecstatic to be doing it, from like January through March. And then I started going through the withdrawns and expireds and seeing like, what if maybe something that I hadn't sold before? And sure enough, I sent them a listing, and they didn't really respond to it. I sent them the old listing. They didn't really respond to it. We looked at some more homes. I sent them the listing again. I was like, I've gotten in touch with the previous listing agent who actually works at my firm, and I was like, we can see it. Like, what do you think? And she was like, it looks okay. And he had no comment. So we looked at some more homes. Finally, I just drove them in my car to the house, and I was like, you guys just got to give me 10 minutes because I've taken all of your information that you've given both verbally and non-verbally, and I think that this actually might be something. And sure enough, it was their house, and they loved it. That's when I was like, okay, I got a knack for this.
I
So,
love it. That's very cool. Yeah, sometimes you gotta get them there, right? You gotta get them on the
mhm.
property, inside the home, to see it in person.
Yeah,
I love that. I remember the Rob Report magazine. I used to enjoy flipping through that decades ago.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. It was the best. Still is.
Have you developed kind of a niche over the years? I know you're with you initially joined a luxury brand, still with the same brand.
No, moved over to Douglas Elliman just under 2 years ago.
Okay.
Really, Austin is has become such a big city that it was important for me and for my clients to make sure that we had just more national reach. And so I moved over to
Yeah.
Douglas Elliman, which has been wonderful. Um, and again, I love my old firm. I adore them. I'm still friends with all those agents. What's really special about the Austin real estate community is that there really is a sense of camaraderie and respect for one another. And in general, I think most people are of the mindset like we're better if we work together than trying to be so divisive. And so I really appreciate the collaboration here in Austin. And it's helped me get so many deals done too. But to answer your question about a niche, um, yes, we primarily focus in the luxury space. That being said, luxury is not a price point, it's a level of service and it's an experience. And so we try to take that luxury approach to all of our clients, no matter what the price point. For me, it is much more about the relationship. I sold a little girl. She was just getting out of college. She was 22 years old. She was buying a $350,000 condo close to the campus because she was going to be going to grad school part time. And so we got her a place. Well, little did I know that her uncle was going to be moving to Austin, less than a year later, and bought an $8 million home from us.
Wow. Yeah.
If you just treat people well, you know, 90% of our business is referral or repeat clients. Um,
Absolutely. I really like how you put that. Luxury is not a price point, it's a level of service, it's an experience. And
it
I
is.
yeah, I think that and that echoes there's been other guests who's really specialized in the luxury space as well on this podcast that have kind of echoed that sentiment that regardless of the actual financial price point of the properties that you might be either listing or searching for to purchase, that it's so important to treat uh, each client the same with the same level of service and really to go above and beyond. And that's kind of part of how you establish that luxury brand, right? That it's how you brand yourself as a luxury agent, is just being consistent with all of your work.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I did not set out when I got into real estate. I wasn't like, I'm going to go and become a luxury agent. That was never a thought in my mind. I just, it just kind of happened organically through
Yeah.
some of the people that I met and whatever. But I'm a deal junkie, and I always tell, because I do get the occasional call or sheepish text message like, "Hey, man," because I have friends of all that make all income levels, right? Friend a couple months ago, "Hey, we bought a house. We didn't. It was only X amount of dollars, so we didn't want to call you." And I'm like, it's always heart wrenching, gut wrenching for me
Yeah.
to to get those phone calls because they just didn't feel like they were up to par, which is not the case. And especially, I had one of my really good friends, always say to me, like, it's important to keep a diverse portfolio within real estate because there will be different price points that are selling at different times,
Hmm.
and diversity is helpful. So we try to just be approachable. We're not we sell a lot of luxury, but we're certainly not your super stuffy agent. We like to have fun with our properties, with our clients. We're really big on community. So we do a lot of community events throughout the year for our clients. Because look, I moved here 12 years ago. I didn't know anybody. Like, and I got into real estate right after that. I understand how hard it is to move to a new city, not have a network, not be plugged in, not know which dentist to go to or doctor or what banker or whatever. Like, we have all of those resources, so we really try to help integrate, especially when people are just new to the city. We're trying to get them as integrated as possible. I love nothing more than when I get like a photo of like some of my clients hanging out with some of my other clients that they met from like our crawfish boil that we do every spring. And like, it's really fun to see that because they live in the same neighborhood. Or maybe I'll be like, "Oh, you guys need to meet these guys, let's do dinner." And just small like little gatherings just to create that community. And it makes me so happy whenever I get those messages. It's awesome.
You mentioned the word network, and I'm going to circle back to that in just a second because that's a big topic that I love to talk about. I love to kind of ask about, really,
Sure.
and get your opinion on. But the first thing I wanted to ask you was early on in your career, when you joined that first brokerage, were you paired up with a mentor, or did you have a mentor early on in your career?
It's funny because they didn't have a training program, as you can imagine, because everyone there were veterans. There was one person who specialized in the contracts, and she educated me a lot on the contracts. But then there's the strategy, right? That is such a big component of what we do. And so I'll never forget, I had like 7 or 8 agents that were like, "Hey, call me if you ever have a question." So I'd call one with one question, one with another one. But there was one guy in particular who always returned my phone calls. I literally was on the phone with him today. He spoke at my wedding. His name is Clay McLaughlin, and he taught me pretty much everything I know. I still bounce ideas around with him. I mean, he's wonderful.
How
So
important do you think that is for an agent early in their career to have someone like that?
I think it's incredibly important. Um, Incredibly important, and also making an effort to have connections with other realtors. Now, I also think that some agents get so involved in their real estate culture that they're hanging out with other agents all the time in their spare time, which I never really quite understood. Now, I love my fellow agents and I do like to hang out with them socially, but it's not my entire social network because also my clients are part of my social network as well. So um, but I love, like, there are a lot of we have a really healthy and strong private network here in Austin. We're a non-disclosure state here in Texas, and so a lot of our luxury properties never hit the MLS. And as a result, we do have meetings where we tour the properties and kind of talk to each other about what's going on in the market. What are we seeing? What are we feeling? Boots on the ground, which is always incredibly invaluable.
What do you think would be some ways that set your business apart in terms of both marketing your brand and marketing listings or homes for your clients? I always there are two things I love to talk about on these podcast episodes, and one of the big topics is marketing. I'm a marketing nerd and always looking for some great insights on that topic. What can you
Yeah.
share about your business?
Okay. Well, marketing has been one of those things. I'm fortunate to have a wonderful marketing director who has been with me for at least 5 years, and she's incredible. I think it's actually technically been four, but it's been more like five. And she's incredible. So she has been a huge part in our brand voice, along with me. But one of my I have a service marked "Let's get you home" is kind of my tagline, and I came up with that lost on a ski slope trying to figure out what my turn was to get back to the group. And I was just saying to myself, like, oh, I'm skiing. It was really snowy. Like, let's get you home. Let's get you home. I was like, wait a minute. That's actually a great. So,
Yeah.
similarly to like luxury is not a price point, but a level of service, similar type deal. Sometimes I love coming up with fun, creative ideas on as far as social goes. So, but as far as our brand marketing, I'm a big equestrian, and if you follow me on social, you've probably seen my horse Sherlock. He's right. He's right there. And so our brand is Giles Group, and so we have like a horse bit included, which I think having that symbolism has been it's relatively new for us. It's been out for about a year, but the iconography of it or whatever, just the recognition has been really strong. And so we've done some fun like hats and shirts and kind of apparel with that brand that people actually enjoy wearing, which is kind of neat. Um, and then we've always tried to keep things like very have a timeless luxury but approachable luxury approach, view on our branding. And then we're able to have more fun through depending on the social platform, right? Like LinkedIn is geared one way versus TikTok being extreme opposites. Instagram is our biggest social platform that we um, you know probably focus most of our efforts on. Um, in the last 3 years, we've done over $50 million in sales through Instagram. So it's been a worthy cause, but or worthwhile effort. But it's a constant. It's constantly changing. Algorithms are constantly changing.
Mhm.
I'm fortunate to have someone on my team who that is their sole focus is social media because I just don't know if I could keep up with it at this point. Coming up with new content, we produce a lot of content that sometimes never gets seen because it's like so cringy. Not everything that we do is just perfect.
I'm the same way.
Um,
I understand that.
yeah, I mean, and some ideas are great in your head, and whenever you see them, you're like, that wasn't it. So we fail a lot, but we have a lot of fun in the process.
Let's get you home. I love that tagline. That's good.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
50
you.
million. So I got to ask, 50 million in 3 years through Instagram alone.
Mhm.
Um, what kind of content do you think resonates? What kind of content do you think on Instagram specifically draws buyers and sellers toward you?
Well, I think I'm not afraid to talk to the camera, and what you see on social is pretty much what you get.
Hmm.
So I love it when I get a phone call from someone and they're like wanting to buy or sell. I'm like, so question like, how'd you find me? And more often than not, they're like, well, we've seen you around here, there, but like we follow you on Instagram. We've been following you on Instagram. I'm like, perfect. It's like a sigh of relief because like I don't have to go in there and even think that I have to pretend to be someone that I'm not,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is great. And I think people value someone who's just gonna allow themselves to be real on camera and so on and so forth. So,
I
yeah,
agree. Yeah. I
yeah.
think authenticity is there's a lot of value in authenticity. I think to a point. I don't think we should be so authentic where we share our feelings all the time on every topic. But I think that, yeah, to your point, it's so important to get to be, uh, like, you don't have to be comfortable on camera, but you do need to get on camera. You do need to be on video, right? So you got to show yourself and your personality, and as far as getting better at it, that just takes some time, and it becomes second nature, right? I'm sure
Totally.
the first few reels you shot years ago were probably a little more awkward than they are now.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I did my very first video uh, like 11 years ago.
Wow.
Um, and I had sold two properties. So my clients, the Army Ranger and the graphic designer, were one of the two groups, and then another couple. And I basically asked them if they would be willing to do a client testimonial video. And a buddy of mine from high school in Louisiana had also moved to Austin. He happened to be a videographer, and so we paired up. I mean, this is way before Facebook had all the algorithms, and you could just run an ad and everyone's going to see it.
Yeah.
And so we did, and we had this video of other people basically talking about how great I was, and we promoted it like crazy, and that's really kind of how I got my start.
I would say you were really ahead of your time. Video testimonials are super valuable, and so it can be so effective in spreading a really positive brand awareness, and totally relevant in 2025. I think that a lot of small business owners, not just real estate agents as well, but local business owners are just kind of catching on to the fact that video testimonials are very powerful. And here you were 11 years ago shooting video testimonials with your clients. That's awesome. I love
Look,
that.
I had nothing to say. I was brand new to the business. What was I going to say?
Right.
Um, I said a couple of things, but yeah, no, it was really kind of them to do that, and it was pretty interesting. A few months, I had just lived here for less than 6 months, and after just a few months of that video running, and I wasn't putting a ton of money. I mean, I had just gotten into business. I didn't have a ton of money to put behind it, but I got stopped at the grocery store and at the gas station and some places. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very
So,
cool. So how long have you been an equestrian?
oh man, my whole life. So,
Whole life.
my first sentence was, "I go see horses." My parents couldn't afford them, and so I was the kid who would clean stalls in exchange for riding lessons, and would get to be the crash test dummy on the young ones that weren't so safe and whatever. And I grew up with a real passion for horses my entire life. Um, and it wasn't until I got older that I was actually able to, like, and thankfully to this career for a long time, getting a horse was my big why. That's really what I was. That was my big goal, because they're not cheap, and I was able to do that, and get Sherlock. 3 years after I had gotten into my career, we went on to be first or second at the World Championships 5 times together. We were world champion or reserve world champion from 2019 to 2022. So maybe 4 years. 4 years. Sorry. And yeah, he's just the best. Now, when I was a kid, someone was kind enough to lease out their horse to me, as long as I could, and I had two jobs, so I could afford to offset the expenses. And it taught me a work ethic, and it taught me drive and passion. And I've been able to take, those teachings from at a young age. If I was gonna get what I wanted, there was no one who was gonna do it for me. And apply that to real estate. So then I was able to one day realize, my own childhood dreams. Since then, he has gone on to compete with other riders. I still own him, but I lease him out to kids who wouldn't have an opportunity like him otherwise.
I love that.
Um,
That's very cool.
it's really cool.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. He's a great horse.
That's got to be very rewarding to be able to kind of pay it forward or pay it back, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah. Pay
yeah.
it forward. That's very cool. Well,
Thanks.
that brings up speaking of niche, that brings up a topic that I can't resist asking. Have you been involved in any equestrian property transactions?
Have, yeah, I have. In fact, back to networking, an agent from San Francisco called me yesterday to list one of her clients' ranches. It's going to be about 15 million and has a big horse component on it. But yeah, we've sold a few ranch properties. Sadly, my horse doesn't live anywhere close to me because he's too fancy for the Texas heat. So he lives out of state, so I don't get to see him very often. But I do have a huge network of other horse friends here. Horse people kind of find one another, and I know a lot about footing and barns and what you need and layouts and all of all the components. You know, and depending on the discipline as well. Because the
Yeah.
footing for certain horses, certain disciplines works, but you need other footing for different. So there's a lot of nuance to it.
What
But
is
yeah,
Sher-
it's a lot of
I bet. I bet. Yeah. It makes sense that that would kind of position you as someone who could bring a lot of value to a transaction like that with the knowledge that you have throughout your life in that area. What discipline is Sherlock specialized in?
And he is a saddlebred. We showed in the amateur three gated division. Saddle seat is the discipline.
Okay.
Um, my husband's pretty involved in the horse world. He created a predictive health wearable for horses. So we get to go to some fun horse races, and he knows a lot of the jumping community and so on and so forth. So
Very
pretty fun.
cool. I love that. Very cool. All right. So, getting back to a question or a topic that I brought up a little while ago, a word that you had mentioned, your network, and wondered if you could share a little bit of insight or your opinion or feelings on how important is networking for success in real estate.
Super important, and I think there's so many different networks that are important. So you've got your local realtor network, which is super important to find out about coming soon. From 2020 to 2022, we represented a tremendous amount of buyers. That's when everyone was moving to Austin. At the time, NAR had come out with data saying that the average home buyer wrote 11 contracts before getting an offer executed. In the peak of the market, that was a national average. We had a 72% success rate. We track a lot of data, but we tracked it from 2020 to 2022. 72% success rate of getting our buyers under contract the first offer that they wrote. And it wasn't always because they had the best offer from like a price or whatever. It was because of the relationships that I had with the other agent, that they knew that I was going to be able to get the deal across the finish line, and that we were going to be able to close, or we would modify things. So it was really, really helpful. Then you've got your national agent referral network, which again is incredibly important because of like I just said, I mean, an agent who I met at a conference a couple years ago that I stayed in touch with casually through email campaigns and whatnot. She sent me a referral, and so there are ways to stay in touch with these people without talking to them once a week. We like to send fun little gift around the holidays to some of our top referral agents around the country, things like that. And then you've got the people in your community, and that network is so invaluable, and I hold close to my vest because and share with my clients. But obviously from any kind of home maintenance, of course, but then bankers, doctors, insurance people, just different other clients that I know that are wanting to build a business, that I'm like, oh well, I know a guy who's got the space or wants to do something similar. You guys should meet. Like, just kind of always thinking about who is in my network and how it might benefit them by being connected to someone else.
Absolutely.
Perfect example. I had some buyers call me last week, moving from Dallas. She already has a job here. He's looking for a job. He tells me what industry he's in. I'm like, oh, one of my best friends is one of the top guys at this company. Would you like an intro? Absolutely, great. Here you go. Here's an intro.
Love it. Yeah.
So
Absolutely. It's one of those intangibles that you can bring, to a sort of the type of value that you can't really put a number on, that you can bring to your clients. I love that. the three that you mentioned, local agent network, national agent network, and of course your local community. From 100% agree with you on the first point. Actually, all three, but the first point, especially with the relationships of local brokers, like it's that abundant mindset where the rising tide raises all ships, right? So if you have a great relationship with the agent on the opposing side, uh, you stand a better chance for sure of coming together than if it were the other way around. Potentially,
Without a doubt. But look, when I
all
first
things being equal, right?
correct, and it's funny how I don't know, 5 years ago, someone called me and said, "Hey, do you have an off market that could help us make value for an appraisal or whatever?" You know what? I think I do. Would you connect me with the appraiser? I'll have them sign an NDA and I'll get that information over to them. Okay, I've done this for people that I don't even know. Agents will just call me and be like, "Hey, I heard that you may have sold something. Yeah, let me help you out. Like, I'll get it to the appraiser with the appropriate stuff." And get my client's permission or whatever, happy to do so. And then, 3 or 4 years down the road, they're the listing agent, you've got a buyer, and they're more than happy to bend over backwards for you. Or the biggest compliment is like, I've had before where they're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so excited you bring me an offer. I've heard you're great to work with." Like,
Yeah,
that's a huge compliment. But when I first got in the business, I had a limiting belief on my abilities, right? And I was working through a lens of insecurity and fear. And so I noticed that my first couple of transactions were like pretty combative. And it's because I wasn't trusting of the other side. And I had, of course, been told war stories by the other agents in my office about how bad agents can be and take advantage of you. So I was feeling very guarded. And they weren't going super well. And I had like a light bulb moment. I was like, if I just handle this, if I go through this as a collaborative approach, you and I, we're going to collaborate together to achieve our end goal. And we start the transaction with that lens. Now, look, there have been times when I'm like, hold on, I'm not dealing with who I thought I was dealing with here, and you have to change course or put additional guardrails up. But generally speaking, if you approach it wholeheartedly, like we're going to get this, we're going to cross the finish line together, I think it just sets the tone for the transaction. And good deals get better, bad deals get worse.
I agree. That's an excellent mindset. And you learned that pretty early in your career, you would say?
It was after my third transaction.
Yeah, yeah.
I can
Well,
tell you where I was. I was driving down South Congress, my windows down. I was like listening to music, and I just had this like boom.
yeah,
Um,
that aha moment, right? Yeah. Well, speaking of early in your career, the other topic that I love to talk about on these podcast episodes, and love to just pick my guest brains, and that is on advice for newer agents. And knowing now what you didn't know then, what uh, what what advice would you have for someone coming into the industry, or who maybe someone who's early in their real estate journey? What like one or two things stand out the most for you?
well, I think the first thing is that here in Austin there are 20,000 realtors roughly, but there's only one you, and not everyone's going to want to work with the number one agent in town. Some people are going to want to work with you because of you and who you are. And I think a lot of times people can get so intimidated by the number of agents, but you got to remember that like you're only in control over yourself and your actions and your attitudes. And if you can go out there and be authentic and truly have people's best interests in mind, I talk people out of buying houses probably more than I talk them into buying houses. Um, and coming from that kind of approach, people value that. They know that they feel like they're not getting scammed, um, and so that would be one thing. The other thing is I would really, especially for the younger generation, if you want to work in this professional setting, it's still a professional setting, and emails need to be well written, and you need to have a certain professionalism in how you conduct business with your clients. Now, I'm not saying you have a really good long term friend that you can be casual with, absolutely, but I think that sometimes I'm a little confused on the professionalism um, that I think the industry deserves.
I agree. I'll keep my response to that short, but yeah, I would be in agreement there too. I think that that there the opportunity to improve the professionalism is abundant still in
Mm.
the industry, but for me, it does those who are really um, uh, conducting themselves professionally with authenticity, but not too far, and really doing things the right way. And you really, it's hard to tell outside looking in, but here in the community, you kind of get to know, who the real pros are, and that they just stand out to me more now than ever. I think social media kind of has a way of diluting, it can kind of work against us and kind of dilute who the real producers are and who aren't. But yeah, I agree. I think that it's it can be. I run into that producing podcasts quite a bit. I'll once in a while have a guest. I produce several other podcasts in addition to this one. This is my only national podcast, and I've had guests who will drop profanity out of the blue, and not the light stuff, the heavy stuff,
Mm.
I'll be taken aback, and I'll be kind of like, look, I'm not personally offended, but I don't want to offend any, I'm not here to like offend or alienate anyone. So I think that there can be a little bit of, when it comes to marketing and communication, there, I think you kind of have to maybe put on, uh,
Yeah,
be a little more careful.
I think that there's a generation who grew up watching real estate TV shows and
Yeah.
think that
Yeah.
is the way it is, and they're sorely disappointed whenever they get into the industry, which is why we've seen, I think, quite a few people that got in within the last 5 years. This, at least here in Austin, which has been a pretty dramatic market, let's just say, the highest of highs and lowest of lows in the last couple of years. Um, you, it's really weeding out, you know, it's weeding out the true professionals
Sure.
from the amateurs, and that needed to happen. So
I'm in the Charlotte market, specifically Lake Norman, just north of Charlotte, sort of a suburb. This region's a suburb of Charlotte, only about 30 minutes from downtown. But we also have, in our metro area, around 20,000 licensed brokers as well. So it's, I would say, a fairly saturated
yeah,
market for sure. Um, but yeah, I think that, we have seen, the market from 21, 22, 23, definitely, I think, we saw a huge increase in those years. And, as the market softens or uh, whatever that looks like,
adjust. Yeah.
adjusts, right? It does kind of weed out those who aren't looking long term at this as a career long term. So yeah, I could expand on that. I'm trying to be politically correct about how, how I talk
Sure.
about my colleagues, right?
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, there's only one you. Definitely, yeah. I think that you should really lean into your strengths and what makes you unique in the marketplace.
Yeah, and don't apologize for not being everyone's golden ticket. I think oftentimes new agents are trying to be everything to everyone. Look, not everyone's cut out to sell farm and ranch. Not everyone's cut out to sell downtown condos, and not everyone's cut out to sell luxury real estate. I think at first glance, a lot of people are like, "Ooh, I want to sell luxury real estate. Those houses are pretty," but do they really? It's a lot of work, and I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm like on, picking up, dog poop in a massive yard of a house 20 minutes before showing in the 110-degree heat. It's not negotiating a $10 million deal over lunch and a glass of Savvy B. It's
Right,
just
right.
not the way it works. But also just kind of really finding out what excites you about real estate. What kind of people do you want to work with?
Yeah, yeah,
Like create your avatar of who your ideal clients are, and then market toward them. You
yes.
know.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with that. I love that you brought that up. Know your avatar, know who your ideal client is, and definitely don't try to don't be disappointed when you find, you realize that you can't possibly serve everyone. You're not meant to. We're not meant to. We have our strengths. We have the people and the type of work that we're drawn to. And other areas where we're less strong. Yeah, I 100% agree that, like, just know who your people are and market to that group, and love on that group, and yeah, and there'll be
And then they
plenty.
will refer you to their people and so on and so forth, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wade, I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect. I really appreciate you accepting my invitation to come on the podcast. This
Thank
is
you for
really an
having me.
honor for me. I really appreciate it. And this has been wonderful. I'm going to let you go because I know you're super busy and I've gone a little bit over the time that I promised. But before I let you go, how can listeners learn more about you and connect with you?
Yeah, totally. Like I said, Instagram, social media, it's Wade ATX. So Wade, Austin, Texas, WADE ATX. My email is wade.giles, Giles, at element.com and gilesgroupaustin.com.
Perfect. I'll have those links and that information in the description for this episode, of course. Wade Giles, Douglas Elliman Real Estate, Austin, Texas. Wade, thanks again so much for joining the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Take care.